A civilization that believed it was eternal has spent thousands of years on the edge of collapse. A land that mastered unity better than any empire in history also created the very forces that could tear it apart. This is the story of China, not just how it rose, but how it refused to die. Because what if the real story of power isn't about becoming strong, but surviving everything designed to break you? And what if the greatest threat was never outside its borders? China was not shaped gently. It was forged by extremes. To the west, the towering Himalayas rose like a wall against the world, protecting the land from invasion but also sealing it away from ideas. While to the north, endless pale landscapes opened the door to nomadic warriors who would test every dynasty that dared to rise. And at the heart of it all flowed the Yellow River, a river so unpredictable it earned a name soaked in fear, China's sorrow. It gave life to early agriculture, feeding entire populations, but when it turned, it didn't warn. It erased. Villages disappeared overnight. Fields became graves. This was the first lesson China ever learned. Survival here required control. Not optional. Absolute. Floods had to be managed. Land had to be organized. People had to be coordinated. Geography didn't just shape the economy, it shaped authority. Because whoever controlled the river controlled life itself. But here lies the contradiction that would echo for thousands of years. The same centralized power that protected the people could also crush them. Unity was strength. Unity was survival. Unity was also a cage. Long before emperors claimed divine right, there were small communities carved into the mud along riverbanks, where survival was fragile and deeply personal. Imagine a farmer kneeling in wet soil at dawn, pressing seeds into the earth with hands already hardened by failure, while his child watches silently, learning not hope, but caution. Nearby, elders burn offerings to unseen spirits, whispering for mercy, because in a world without explanation, belief becomes the only form of control. These early settlements were not primitive, they were adaptive. They built tools, shared labor, and formed social bonds not out of choice, but necessity. Agriculture anchored them to the land, but it also chained them to its risks. A single flood could erase generations. A single drought could starve an entire community. And slowly, almost invisibly, something changed. Survival stopped being individual. It became collective. Decisions required coordination. Authority began to form. Not because people wanted power, but because without it, they would not last. This was the quiet beginning of civilization. And like all civilizations, it came with a price. The more organized life became, the less freedom remained. From scattered villages emerged the first dynasties, blurred between myth and history, but real in their consequences. Power began as a promise, protection from chaos, order in a dangerous world. Under early rulers like those of the Shang dynasty, kings claimed something more than authority. They claimed connection to the divine. Through oracle bones and rituals, they spoke to ancestors, shaping not just decisions, but belief itself. This was not governance. This was psychological architecture. If the ruler speaks for heaven, then disobedience becomes more than rebellion, it becomes sacrilege. And yet beneath this structure, tension was already building. Because power, once centralized, does not stay balanced. It expands. It demands more labor, more loyalty, more control. The Zhou dynasty attempted to solve this with the mandate of heaven, a concept both brilliant and dangerous. It justified rule, but also justified rebellion. If a ruler failed, heaven had withdrawn its support. And anyone strong enough could claim to restore it. This created a system that was stable, until it wasn't. Because once people believe power can be taken, they begin to look for weakness. And weakness always exists. The structure held, for a time. But cracks were spreading. Quietly. Inevitably. But this system was already breaking, and no one could stop what came next. The fall of Zhou authority did not explode, it fractured, then shattered, dragging China into the Warring States period, where unity dissolved into survival. Kingdoms did not fight for dominance. They fought to avoid extinction. This was not just war. This was elimination. Imagine a young soldier standing ankle-deep in mud, gripping a spear he barely knows how to use, watching the horizon fill with enemies who look exactly like him. Same language, same ancestors, same fear. Victory didn't mean glory. It meant living one more day. Out of this chaos emerged thinkers like Confucius and Laozi, not as peaceful philosophers, but as witnesses to collapse, trying to answer a single question: how do you rebuild a world that has already broken? And then came the man who didn't ask that question. He answered it with force: Qin Shi Huang. He unified China not through diplomacy, but through absolute domination. Laws were standardized. Writing was unified. Roads connected the empire. And dissent was erased. Books burned. Scholars silenced. Entire histories rewritten. This was not unity born from trust. It was unity imposed through fear. This was not a nation forming. This was a system being forced into existence. He didn't unite China. He ended everything that resisted it. And yet, even this level of control could not last. Because fear builds obedience, but never loyalty. What looked like unbreakable strength was already decay. The Qin dynasty collapsed almost as quickly as it rose, proving a brutal truth: control can create an empire, but it cannot sustain it. From its ashes rose the Han dynasty, shifting from raw force to structured governance, blending Confucian ideals with centralized authority. For the first time, China experienced something close to lasting stability. Trade expanded along routes that would become the Silk Road. Culture flourished. People believed in the system, not because they feared it, but because it worked. For a moment, it felt permanent. This was not peace. It was a pause between storms. Corruption grew. Power concentrated. And slowly, the system weakened from within. Because every dynasty followed the same pattern: rise, peak, decay, collapse. Not coincidence. Design. And then came the breaking point. The fall of the Han dynasty shattered not just political unity, but identity itself. China fragmented into warlord states where loyalty meant nothing and survival meant everything. Imagine a mother hiding her child as soldiers raid her village, not knowing which army they belonged to, only knowing that it doesn't matter. This was not just collapse. This was psychological destruction. For centuries, unity became memory instead of reality. And yet, impossibly, it returned. The Sui and Tang dynasties rebuilt what had been lost, reconnecting regions, restoring infrastructure, reviving culture. Under the Tang, China became a global center of influence, drawing in merchants, scholars, and ideas from across Asia. It looked like the cycle had been broken. It hadn't. The stronger the system became, the heavier it grew, and weight always finds a breaking point. The Song dynasty pushed innovation further, advancing technology, commerce, and urban life, but struggled to defend itself. And when external forces came, they didn't knock, they overwhelmed. Under Kublai Khan, China fell under Mongol rule, becoming part of a vast empire that stretched across continents. This was not just conquest. It was transformation through domination. Identity shifted. Power redefined. And when the Yuan collapsed, the Ming dynasty rose with a renewed obsession: control, borders, protection. Walls expanded. Isolation deepened. It felt safe. It felt secure. It was either. Because while China turned inward, the world outside accelerated. And for the first time, China would face something it could not control. The 19th century arrived not as a challenge, but as a shock. Western powers, armed with industrial technology and driven by expansion, forced their way into China's world. The Opium Wars were not just military defeats. They were psychological fractures. Imagine a coastal villager watching foreign ships dominate the horizon, realizing that centuries of strength mean nothing against something entirely new. For the first time in its history, China was not deciding its fate. It was watching someone else write it. This was not just loss. This was humiliation. They didn't lose a war. They lost the illusion of control. Unequal treaties followed. This was the moment it could have ended. This was the edge. When the Qing dynasty finally fell in 1912, it didn't bring clarity. It created a vacuum. The idea of China remained, but its structure was gone. Warlords carved the land into fragments. Ideologies clashed. And then came invasion. Japan's expansion into China was not just war. It was devastation layered onto chaos. Civilians were not observers. They were targets. Imagine a family fleeing through burning streets, carrying only what they can hold, not knowing if there is anywhere left to run. This was not transformation. This was survival under collapse. Out of this turmoil rose a new conflict, the Chinese Civil War, a brutal struggle over what China would become. And when Mao Zedong declared the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, it was not a moment of peace. It was the beginning of another experiment in control. Massive campaigns like the Great Leap Forward aimed to reshape the nation overnight, but reality resisted. Famine spread. Millions suffered. This was not progress. It was pressure applied to a system not ready to hold it. And yet, the country endured. Because survival, by now, was embedded in its identity. Today, China stands as one of the most powerful nations on Earth, its cities rising faster than history can keep up, its economy reshaping global systems, its influence stretching across continents. But beneath the surface, the same patterns remain. Centralized authority. Collective identity. The constant tension between control and adaptability. The forces that built China have never disappeared. They have only evolved. Because history here does not end. It accumulates. China's story is not about stability. It is about survival through instability. It has faced floods, invasions, internal collapse, and its own contradictions, and each time, it has not simply recovered. It has transformed. This was not a nation moving forward. This was a civilization learning how not to break. It did not survive because it was strong. It became strong because it survived. And now, as China stands once again at the center of global power, the question is no longer how it rose, but whether any system, no matter how controlled, no matter how unified, can survive the weight of everything it has built. Because in the end, history does not test how powerful a nation becomes, it tests how much truth it can endure about itself.